If you'd like, you can look at page 585 in the Chumashim for me to just bring to your attention something unusual in Torah. What's unusual is the very small Aleph that begins the central book, the middle book of the Torah. Vayikra el Moshe, and called to Moshe. Vaydaber Adonai Elav, the ever-present one, spoke to him. This little Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the A, is not only small here in our printed text, it's small in the parchment, in the Torah scroll as well. As is the nature of some customs, the practices there are not always the reason why. And so the rabbis speculate. First, they give context. Vayikra el Moshe. Last week, the tabernacle is completed, but it's covered with a cloud. And it's not clear that Moses is given permission to enter in. And so the Rashbam, Rashi's grandson in France in the 12th century, says that this opening, these three words, Vayikra el Moshe, are the bridge. Tabernacle is completed. Moses, you're invited in. I'm going to talk with you. But that's only the first level of explanation. The second is that Moses is the scribe. It's Moses who, in writing the Torah, chooses to make the Aleph very small. In describing Bil'am, the non-Jewish prophet, later in the Torah, it'll say Vayikra, that God happened upon Bil'am, the prophet. And Moses, in his humility, wanted it to say Vayikra, that he's no different. He too spoke to God, but God happened to come to him. And God said, no, I called you. Write an Aleph. But Moses, in his humility, wrote a little Aleph, so as to say, I don't hold myself out as the one to whom God calls, even though I was called. There's a third explanation, that of my teacher, Rabbi Abraham Twersky. He points out that the first thing that children are taught in the 5 books of Moses is today's Torah reading, not the stories of Genesis traditionally. At age 5 in the Cheder in Eastern Europe, children were introduced to Bible with sweets and these words, and that the Aleph represents children. Why do they learn Vayikra first? It's because the offerings had to be pure, and children are pure. And so they should learn at the age in which, age of 5, there's still that quality of purity. And so Rabbi Twersky, who's also a psychiatrist, emphasized that Vayikra, the call, is to each of us, that we should all know our importance. He makes a distinction between conceit, which is thinking yourself very much better than others, and empowerment, in which you know you are honored and valued in God's eyes and in the eyes of others. And he says that's the little Aleph, to feel that you too are worthy of being called. One more closing comment. On the letter Aleph itself. The letter Aleph itself, what does it sound like? It's a trick question, because the Aleph has no sound. The Aleph only takes the sound of the vowel to which it's attached. A, O, E, depending on the vowel. The Aleph has no sound. It's silence. The rabbis will also point out that the shape, if you can look in the book, the shape of the Aleph is a long slash, that's a vav, and a yud and a yud. 26, if you add up the letters, which is the same as God's name, Yud He Vav He. That embedded in the Aleph, in its shape, so the mystics point out, is the entirety of God's presence. When do we encounter God? In the most impactful ways, in the midst of silence. When we allow ourselves to be open to listen to the person in front of us, to the needs around us, and to the glory and beauty of the world. When we are most present, which requires an inner stillness, we then hear God's voice. And in hearing God's voice, we hear ourselves called. And so a final way to understand this opening of the central book of the 5 books, that at the center, is that it begins with a call in which in the first word we're focused on a little aleph, on the challenge of knowing that we need to live life with humility, that each person, beginning with a child, is empowered to feel called, but ultimately to hear the call is to engage in the aleph of silence, of God's presence, and then to know that it's our responsibility both to listen, to respond, to be responsible as God's partners. Ribono shel Olam Vayikra el Moshe. As you called to Moshe, so may we hear ourselves called to. Amen.